Welcome back to Following a Note on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 174, and we're covering chapters 8 through 16 of The Hero of Ages. Eliot, how are you?
Doing great, doing great. Getting into the getting into that, "Oh, I'm in a new book now" stage. Like, we got through the first initial chapters, and you're just kind of feeling out what the book is gonna be like. I feel like we're starting to settle into a rhythm for Hero of Ages, I think.
Paul?
I agree. I agree. We're starting to get into it a little bit. Feels nice. Get the wheels turning into our book here. No further thoughts. I'm excited to dive further in.
Sounds good. Two quick announcements before the intro. First, with our Stormlight refreshers that we started last week, we will do those for each episode moving forward, assuming we're not painfully over time. If we've spent like an hour and a half, an hour plus, we're not going to keep Paul up into midnight hours and do a Stormlight refresher. So if we're right about at the hour to 10 minute mark, which is usually what we go for, we'll do a quick Stormlight refresher at the end of the episode. If we're over painfully, it's not that we forgot it; it's that we're just closing early so that we don't go way over. Announcement number 2, Eliot. I know you want to talk about these epigraphs because they're slightly more interesting than the previous books. So we're going to start with that because we didn't mention them at all last week. So we will start with epigraphs after the intro. All right, I lied. We will start with the epigraphs after Eliot does a brief summary, and then we'll do epigraphs. Go ahead.
And tease it out even more. Let's see. Summary. Chapters 8 through 16 of The Hero of Ages. They're still just trying to figure stuff out. Vin has a bunch of conversations with her Kolos, who we find out has a name, kind of confusing name at that.
Yes.
We continue to learn a bit more about Kandra. We keep jumping into perspective of Hensoon, our Kandra pal. So we are learning a little bit more about politics and what he's in for in the Kandra world. Let's see what else. Apparently, Set is on the team now, and we've get some strategy discussions with him as they decide what they're going to do about the problems facing the entire world and trying to find the last cache that the Lord Ruler left, and also figure out how to deal with some of the other problems they have, like the cities of Fadrex and Urtau. And yeah, then we switch over to Spook in chapter 14. That wraps up part 1. So at the start of part 2, we jump into Spook's perspective and learn some very interesting things about him and the situation that he is in. And yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Sounds good. I am excited to get into talking about Kolos, who's named human, but wants to be human, but is actually a Kolos. But first, I want to go through these epigraphs. I'm going to go through them 2 at a time. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm so excited for these epigraphs. But first, I hate to cut you off, but this is way more important than epigraphs. We will get to those. We have a new surgeon in our midst, which I have to announce before we get too in the weeds of epigraphs, which I can't wait to be in. But I actually want to shout out our new surgeon this week is someone who is a good friend of the podcast, someone who we've actually had as a guest in the past. Our good old friend Tim. Tim, if you're listening, your name looks very short on my cup this week, because it's only 3 letters, so that's why. We're very thankful for your support as a surgeon and also just as a friend, and as always, just a fellow Cosmere reader. It's always fun to to find something to relate about like this, and it's really grown into just such a beautiful community. And I'm getting way too sappy when we're about to. Trevor and Eliot are trying to dive into these epigraphs, which I am too, of course. But anyways, that ends my mini rant. Thank you so much, Tim. And I hope we can do the epigraphs justice. We will. I'm super excited about this. So, with all that said, take it away, Trevor.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate you backing us
Oh, I thought you were
on Patreon.
calling me Tim by accident. Okay, yes,
No.
thank you, Tim. Yes, sorry, thank you, Tim. I said to you, Trevor, and you said thank you, Tim, so it threw me off. Anyways, I'm done. You got it.
Okay. The Hero of Ages, the epigraphs, Eliot. In the previous book, you verbally complained multiple times about how there was nothing in the epigraphs, they were boring.
Did.
Is that how you feel this time?
No, not at all. I'm getting a lot of very pertinent information out of the epigraphs, a lot of hints, a lot of information, and yet, I'm scarred now from the previous book,
Ah,
and so now I'm second guessing everything. I'm reading these epigraphs, going, "Oh wow, that explains everything," or am I being lied
is it
to?
written in steel? Do I know this is true?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm holding paper in my hand, so clearly it could have been changed.
I don't know
Yeah,
if that would be quite cost effective shipping every copy of the Hero of Ages with little metal plates in the book. So you're gonna have to forgive just paper.
probably not.
Okay, chapter 1.
That's why there's so many differences between your two books. They've been
Oh,
altered by Ruin.
how did we not bring that up? Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think they should have just
mystery
invested in
solved.
the metal plating, the steel plating for the books. Is what they really needed to invest
How
in.
That is incredible, Paul. How did I not come up with that by myself? That was
Well, it takes a certain type of genius,
It
Trevor.
does,
So
and
you're
I
very
clearly
welcome.
don't have it.
You're very welcome.
All right, how much further can we push off reading these epigraphs? What else do we want to talk about before I No.
So I'm kidding.
Chapter 1.
Go ahead.
I am, unfortunately, the Hero of Ages. Chapter 2. Holding the power did strange things to my mind. In just a few moments, I became familiar with the power itself, with its history, with the ways it might be used. Yet, this knowledge was different from experience, or even ability to use that power. For instance, I knew how to move a planet in the sky, yet I didn't know where to place it so that it wouldn't be too close or too far from the sun. Each of these I'm going to throw to you, Eliot, just for quick 30-second input, and then we'll bounce it off Paul for non-spoiler reactions. So you go first, Eliot.
Okay, moving planets. This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And stepping towards explanations for things, which is pretty cool. Such as we know, or we think we know, that Scadrial wasn't always the way it is now, with volcanoes exploding and ash everywhere. It used to have green plants, it used to have flowers, all that kind of thing. Moving a planet too close to the sun or wherever it's not supposed to be, yeah, that might cause some problems like that. So, yeah, answered. I Again, I'm doubting, I'm hesitant. Like who's writing these? I am the Hero of Ages. Okay, we know of two Hero of Ages. And later on, it's going to talk about like stuff we learned about the Lord Ruler. So it doesn't seem like we're talking about the Lord Ruler.
Okay.
So obvious answer might be Vin.
Okay.
This is a Vin journal.
Yep.
This is the think way down the line. You know, Vin's got the Lord Ruler's old journal. Well, not actually his journal, but I guess Hero of Ages old journal. I'm envisioning like hundreds of years in the future, someone picks up Vin's journal, and this is what they're reading now in these entries.
Any input, Paul?
So I like what you're saying about this could be Vin's journal, but in the context of what this says, it talks about how the power kind of addled their mind, and that they had
Yeah.
insinuating that whoever this is had the power for a while, more than a moment, because we saw how long Vin had the power. So I
Right.
would say that this is not Vin.
Or at least not
but
yet, Vin.
fair. Still could be in the future. But at least as we know right now, I'm thinking this is someone else.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we're not saying this is something way in the future, this is like a little, future to a sneak peek. Then it has to be someone else. It can't be Vin. Which is what I like to think. So, yeah. As far as the other stuff, I don't know if we saw a brief glimpse at the end of Well of Ascension from Ven of this power, but I don't know if it really captured the magnitude of it. I wasn't thinking about moving planets. I was thinking about like the power to heal Elend and destroy people and destroy cities or things like that, This seems like a very universal scale, not just a global scale, if that makes sense. And it's kind of scary. I mean, especially when we look at a lot of the characters that we've seen in the story, even characters that are revered, like Kelsey, for example. Like with that power, would he do good? Would he do bad? It's scary to think of a normal person having that much power. I guess they would kind of become not a normal person with that power, but you know what I mean.
So the only input I have is if you guys remember Cosmere 101, like a year and a half ago when we did that episode. You remember like the little preview excerpt, like summaries of each planet written by our in-world scholar Chris, who's from Silverlight. Silverlight's a city, I believe, in Shadesmar in the cognitive realm. It's a human city in Shadesmar, and it's kind of your interplanetary hub. We've never been there. We've just met a couple people that are from there. She said in her Scadrial like excerpt thing that it's hard to track Scadrial and study Scadrial because the planet has physically moved multiple times. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
I do now that you mention it.
So I just wanted to bring that up because it's mildly relevant when you say, I knew how to move a planet in the sky, yet I didn't know where to place it. Moving forward. Chapter 3. In some ways, having such power was too overwhelming, I think. This was a power that would take millennia to understand. Remaking the world would have been easy had one been familiar with the power. Yet, I realized the danger inherent to my ignorance. Like a child suddenly given awesome strength, I could have pushed too hard and left the world a broken toy I could never repair. Chapter 4. This is actually what happened to Rashik, I believe. He pushed too hard. He tried to burn away the mists by moving the planet closer to the sun, but he moved it too far, making the world far too hot for the people who inhabited it. The ash mounts were the ash mounts were his solution to this. He had learned that shoving a planet around required too much precision, so instead he caused the mountains to erupt, spewing ash and smoke into the air. The thicker atmosphere made the world cooler and turned the sun red.
So, does Eliot have to go first? Are we still doing that?
Yes, Eliot has to go first.
Okay.
The biggest new information there, I guess, is the ash mounts, which is a curious and I guess effective solution to the problem. Ooh, my planet is too hot. Let me make a bunch of volcanoes erupt all over it. Okay. But
Yeah.
I guess it achieves what he's trying to do, although I think the epigraphs here are going to get into he kind of keeps creating more problems with all the solutions that he comes up with.
Paul?
You make a very good point, Eliot. In my head, I'm like, you just moved the planet too close. Why don't you just move it back a little bit? sure it's way more complicated than that. But, all I was going to say was this does, whoever our writer is here is writing back referencing Rashik, knowing what Rashik did. So it probably is from the future, right? Because we haven't had one between Rashik and where we are now. So
As far as we know, but yeah.
yeah, that's fine. So as of right now, it lends to your theory a lot more with the one that I just was putting down. So, anyways.
All right, Mr. Science Engineer guy. If you take a planet, don't change its mass, and push it closer to the sun, does that decrease its year length? Because it's going faster?
So, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
That's what I thought.
Me too.
All right. Chapter 5. Each time Rashik tried to fix things, he made them worse. He had to change the world's plants to make them able to survive the new harsh environment. Yet, that change left the plants less nutritious to mankind. The falling ash would make men sick, causing them to cough like those who spent too long mining beneath the earth. And so, Rashik changed mankind itself as well, altering them so that they could survive. Chapter 6. Rashik soon found a balance in the changes he made to the world, which was fortunate, for his power burned away quite quickly. Though the power he held seemed immense to him, it was truly only a tiny fraction of something much greater. Of course, he did end up naming himself the Sliver of Infinity in his religion. Perhaps he understood more than I give him credit for. Either way, we had him to thank for a world without flowers, where plants grew brown rather than green, and where people could survive in an environment where ash fell from the sky on a regular basis.
Curious bit there about the power faded away. That seems odd.
Yeah.
Not sure what that's about. Also, just another curious note, Ruin is at work yet again. Every single one of these you read is like 2 or 3 words different in my copy. Nothing has been like completely different. It's all kind of achieving the same thing, but it's like every third sentence is written differently. Says the same thing, but it's different grammar.
That's so funny, because canonically in world, that's how he changes things. He doesn't like completely change it. He just changes like small grammar things so that the meaning is slightly altered. That's really funny. Anything, Paul, before I go?
No, feel free to go on.
All right. 7 and 8. I speak of us as we, the group, those of us who are trying to discover and defeat Ruin. Perhaps my thoughts are now tainted, but I like to look back and see the sum of what we were doing as a single, united assault, though we were all involved in different processes and plans. We were one. That didn't stop the world from ending, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is too easy for people to characterize Ruin as simply a force of destruction. Think rather of Ruin as an intelligent decay, not simply chaos, but a force that sought in a rational and dangerous way to break everything down to its most basic form. Ruin could plan and carefully plot, knowing if he built one thing up, he could use it to knock down 2 others. The nature of the world is that when we create something, we often destroy something else in the process.
I mean, these ones seem ominous. Whenever this was written in the future, this person felt it important to state that didn't stop the world from ending. Oh,
Yes.
okay, great. So we have a world ending in front of us to look forward to. And then the one for chapter 8 really starts to get into a question that's on my mind, which is, where is Ruin gonna fall on our alignment spectrum?
Yeah.
Is Ruin evil? I can make some comparisons to Stormlight, which I probably shouldn't for spoilery reasons, but I'm quite curious. We've got a strong, powerful being. I'll drop the word shard, but whether a shard is good or evil seems really important, especially to the inhabitants of whatever planet that shard might be on.
Right.
And so are we in a situation where preservation is good and ruin is evil? I'm I'd be surprised if it was that black and white, knowing Brandon. But it seems like that's kind of the direction it's going, is heroes need to band together to defeat the evil ruin.
I like what you're saying, Elliot. I kind of want to expand on that a little bit. Especially, okay, so I might be misquoting it, but you just read the epigraph about like setting one thing up and knocking two things down, and that's kind of the nature of it. Is that roughly the right sentiment?
Yeah.
It almost seems. So I think you're right. I think it's Elliot. I think it's a little more complicated than ruin bad, preservation is good. You know, it seems like ruin, even let's say ruin as a shard. This is getting real big Cosmere. So, um, but ruin as a shard. I don't know if you had like the best person ever as the shard of ruin. It feels like they would inevitably still enact ruin. Like it feels like it's an inevitable aspect of the shard to kind of lead to maybe decay or destruction. I mean, it talks about ruin as what, like breaking things down to simpler elements or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's tough because looking at it, you're like, that's bad, that's not good. I don't know. We'll have to learn a lot more about ruin for me to be able to like go much further than that. But it is a weird dilemma. It doesn't seem to me. Well, it does seem to me like reading the book. I'm like, ruin is evil. But me thinking about potentially the shard of ruin makes me think the shard of ruin is not necessarily evil, but inevitably harmful or inevitably difficult,
Right.
I guess. So it's kind of a little bit of a complication there, I think, which is interesting and what I'm gonna be that's what I'm gonna be thinking through as we continue to read.
Yeah. The minor, greater Cosmere spoilers. If Mistborn is the only thing you've picked up, the two things you have to consider when talking to a shard is the shard itself, which is ruin in this case, and then the vessel, the shard holder, and how that person interprets that power. Because they have some influence on what they do with that power, but when all's said and done, the intent of the shard, which is ruin, is going to have more influence over the holder than the holder is over the shard. So, like you're saying, Paul, even if you're really good and holding ruin, at some point you're probably going to go askew just because of the shard you're holding. All right. Chapter 9. Allomancy was indeed born with the mists. Or at least, Allomancy began at the same time as the mists. When Rashik took the power at the Well of Ascension, he became aware of certain things. Some were whispered to him by Ruin. Others were granted to him as an instinctive part of the power. One of these was an understanding of the three metallic arts. He knew, for instance, that the nuggets of metal in the Chamber of Ascension would make those who ingested them into Mistborn. These were, after all, fractions of the very power in the well itself. Chapter 10. Nuggets of pure allomancy, the power of preservation itself. Why Rashik left one of those nuggets at the Well of Ascension, I do not know. Perhaps he didn't see it, or perhaps he intended to save it to bestow upon a fortunate servant. Perhaps he feared that someday he would lose his power and would need the nugget to grant him allomancy. Either way, I bless Rashik for his oversight, for without that nugget, Elend would have died that day at the well.
So now we're getting answers. Now we're getting told what happened. What did Elend ingest that made him a Mistborn? Well, here you go. A nugget of pure allomancy. Power of preservation itself. There's a lot of information in that single sentence.
Yeah. Which you asked at the end of last book, where does that metal that he swallowed go on our little periodic table of the
Right.
allomantic metals? I don't think it'll go on there. I think it's independent. We know the author is not Elend, unless he's talking about Elend in the third person.
Yeah,
That'd be
logical.
a sneaky way to cover it. Just being honest there, you know.
Anything else? All right. I think three more, so I'll go ahead and read them all. The first contract, oft spoken by the Kandra, was originally just a series of promises made by the first generation to the Lord Ruler. They wrote these promises down, and in doing so, codified the first Kandra laws. They were worried about governing themselves independently of the Lord Ruler and his empire, so they took what they had written to him, asking for his approval. He commanded it cast into steel, then personally scratched his signature into the bottom. This code was the first thing that a Kandra learned upon awakening from his life as a Mistwraith. It contained commands to revere earlier generations, simple legal rights granted to each Kandra, provisions for creating new Kandra, and a demand for ultimate dedication to the Lord Ruler. Most disturbingly, the first contract contained a provision which, if invoked, would require the mass suicide of the entire Kandra people. Chapter 12. Rashik moved the Well of Ascension, obviously. It was very clever of him, perhaps the cleverest thing he did. He knew that the power would one day return to the well. For such as this, the fundamental power by which the world itself was formed does not simply run out. It can be used, therefore diffused, but it will always be renewed. So, knowing the rumors and tales would persist, Rashik changed the very landscape of the world. He put mountains in what became the north and named that location Terrace. Then he flattened his true homeland and built a capital there. He constructed his palace around that room at its heart, the room where he would meditate, the room that was the replica of his old hovel in Terrace, a refuge created during the last moments before he ran out of power. Chapter 13. Hemalurgy, it is called because of the connection to blood. It is not a coincidence, I believe, that death is always involved in the transfer of powers via hemalurgy. Marsh once described it as a messy process. Not the adjective I would have chosen. It's not disturbing enough. So it's not Marsh.
And probably not a Kandra either, although that seems unlikely that a Hero of Ages would be a Kandra, but maybe so, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, more answers. More like direct, here's what happened. The Lord Ruler reshaped the world and renamed regions so that it would confuse people. Answers.
Yeah.
Which that is so cheating, by the way. Like, oh, you're trying to figure out where this is? Oh yeah, those mountains, I destroyed them. It's all flat now. That area that you thought was flat, nope, mountains. Good luck figuring that one out.
I feel like if you got that much power, you should make something in the northern fake terrace mountains that you just made to have a thumping noise like the Well of Ascension, or else you're going to have a Vin walking around and be like, there's nothing actually up here. I'm going to go back to Luthadel, which is exactly what happened.
The hint about the mass suicide of the Kandra
Yeah.
seems, I want to say like direct foreshadowing, but very likely a rather important hint.
And we'll get into it here in a second, but it also gives way more weight to why the Kandra are so scared. Like, we learn a lot
Yeah.
about Kandra in this episode, which we'll talk about here in a second. They have really weird laws for this reason, that apparently there's something in the first contract that would require them all to kill themselves if that was triggered.
Which I can see why there's confusion amongst the Kandra, the politics and what Tensoon is saying and all that about, well, who are they beholden to now?
Right.
Their entire existence is related to this contract that the Lord Ruler wrote. Well, now what? Lord Ruler's gone.
Yeah.
So does that mean all the laws are irrelevant? Clearly, the in charge Kandra don't think so, but I can definitely see how this becomes a interesting legal question.
Right. And that let's go ahead and talk about Tensoon because I do want to ask this directly right now. Are we told, or can we figure out if a contract holder dies for a Kandra, is the contract then transferred to someone or is it voided?
Seems
I
like a
don't think we've.
very seems
I
like an
don't know.
important question.
Yeah, I don't know if we've like seen any special like another like application of that. We've never like seen anything like that, have we?
Yes, we have. I can disprove this actually. Answer my own question. Zane dies, and Tensoon does not then serve Vin. He returns to his homeland to get a new assignment. So that's our answer. That when what's his face Zane dies, the contract is void and he leaves, as opposed to it gets transferred to Vin. So his argument in his trial here that the first contract is now transferred to Vin actually doesn't have any legs to stand on, right? All the other contracts are just going to say it's void, and we don't owe Vin anything.
So I will push on that a little bit. So this normal contract, these contracts that he had with Zane, right?
Hmm.
That's just that's like I assume there's just like a standard contract, which is basically you are this person's assistant. You do whatever they command within the rules of their overarching rules and contracts and things. It doesn't matter if Zane is a Mistborn who's trying to do all this crazy stuff, or if Zane is just a chill guy who likes to go for walks, right? Like, it doesn't actually not make much of a difference. So all I'm saying is that it's just like to that person, it's not like for a specific purpose, I guess. Whereas the like first contract, I don't know. I feel like I would need to read it because I feel like I don't know if it's to a specific purpose or, I guess, seat of power, like a king, if you will, like with the Lord Ruler, or if it is like that, where it is like to Rashik the person, not like the Lord Ruler figure, if that makes sense.
Sure.
The holder of the power versus the person. I think it would come down to some form of technicality there, as to whether or not his argument has legs to stand on or not. I did think it was kind of a funny argument. I was kind of expecting him to not have a logical argument coming into the scene, and then he pulls it out, and I'm like, okay, I could see that, but I could also see everyone just being like, no, absolutely not. You know, she has nothing to do with this on that scale, you know, and moving forward, you know.
Voiding contracts is weird because if they're saying that the first contract is now void, well, what do you do? Like, does the first generation even have power anymore? Because the first generation is the ones who made the contract with the Lord Ruler. But if their contract is void, then why are they listening to the first generation at that point anymore? Like, doesn't their whole thing break down if once the Lord Ruler dies?
Seems like it.
So what do we know about the first contract? That's really what it comes down to.
The only things that we're told is in that epigraph that we just read, which was writing rules for yourself so you don't have to govern yourself because they were scared. And then Tensoon references a couple times in these chapters that the contracts they make are referenced from the first contract. It was made with the Lord Ruler, and they have to follow each contract to the letter, or else they're in big trouble, which Tensoon is here. But as far as the contents of it, I couldn't tell you.
I think that's ultimately what it kind of hinges on, is whatever the first contract actually is, what it actually is about. That would be kind of my takeaway. Is you could kind of jump around with it. Of it maybe this, maybe that, but I don't know if I could solidly land anywhere without without knowing what really the first contract entails.
Anything else on Tensoon? We don't get a verdict at the end of part 1 here for him. We get he gives his big speech. We should go sign up on Vin's team because our contract's with her now because she's the mother is what he says. And the first generation doesn't answer him, and so the second generation say, we'll give you a ruling in a month, and that's where we leave him. So anything else on Tensoon?
Just the one note, and it was in one of the epigraphs there as well, that Kandra are apparently made from mist wraiths,
Yeah.
which is kind of a cool explanation. I mean, we knew they were related, but not only are they related, they're directly related. It's you take a mist wraith and you awaken it somehow into a Kandra, like a fledgling Kandra that you then have to teach the ways of the Kandra, apparently.
Minor other Cosmere spoilers. Where have we heard the verb awaken before?
Was that Warbreaker?
Warbreaker. Yeah. You
Yeah.
push breaths into it and awaken it.
Ooh.
There you go. I'm actually curious to know Eliot's thoughts. Just zooming out a little bit, just like looking at the book. How do you feel about this whole like Kandra and the generations? There's a lot of like, oh, the second generations, they're lazy bums but crafty or whatever, and there's the fourth, fifth generation kids are just rebellious, or like there's this whole thing. I'm curious to know just what you think about it as a whole.
It it seems like a almost sarcastic commentary on like our world. You think about generations in our world and how there's generational differences, and the older generations complain about the younger generations, and the younger generations complain about how stodgy and unwilling to change the older generations are. And I feel like that's probably been a thing since the beginning of time. And you kind of the Kandra, it's kind of inflated to a whole different level because they don't die. And so you have like brand new eighth, ninth generationers and first generation Kandra, the first of their kind that ever lived, all in the same place. And so you not just have like 20, 40, 60, 80 year like generational differences, you have hundreds of years of generations altogether. So a rather interesting cultural structure. I'm actually kind of intrigued by it.
I agree. I think it's pretty fascinating. I keep thinking this to myself. I haven't read anything of Mistborn Era 2, but I keep having this sneaking suspicion that whenever we get there, that we're going to meet someone who's like, oh, I'm a 42nd generation Kandra or whatever, something way
Yeah.
down the line. I keep thinking that. I have no reference for that and nowhere to go with that point, but I'm wondering how far these generations are going to go or how new they are.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Tensoon's rebellious young actions are just misunderstood. You just don't get me, right? Like, you just don't understand.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And just as a side note, Era 2 is only 300 years down the road, so it'd only be like generation like 14 that we're talking about instead of 42. Assuming things kept going as is.
Assuming there's not a mass suicide of all the Kandra.
That's true. Yeah, but would you really invent a magic system and then mass suicide them when you're just starting the series? Seems kind of lame.
Sounds like a Sander Lanchy kind of thing to me.
Could be a book 3 kind of thing,
It's true.
I wouldn't leave that out of the question.
Let's talk about Vin and Elend. They're trying to figure out the mists. This town that they've just rescued last episode, they then force them into the mists, and they know that about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 of them will get Mistborn or mist sickness, and then some of them will die from it and some of them will be fine. So then they're marching them all the way back to Luthadel for their own good because the mists are encroaching on their little outskirt town here that they've just rescued them in. But then they force them into the mists because they have to travel during the mist hours. Elend and Vin really have a hard time with this. They're trying to figure out, are we killing these people? Is because we're asking them to do this, or even forcing them to do this, are we killing whatever it is, like 3% of them or whatever it is?
I had some flashbacks. PTSD is probably too strong of a word, to like COVID. Think about this like COVID,
Yeah.
you know? Some kind of similar discussions were had, right? Of, well, we just need to attain herd immunity. We just need to
Yes.
we just need to get to the point where we've got enough people immune, and then it'll kind of die out. Well, a lot of people died from COVID in our world, and so it's a discussion that's like relevant in our modern day of, do you just say, well, this is a part of life, we need to get to immunity as quickly as we can, or do you expend resources to try and protect everyone on the chance that they're gonna get sick and die? Big questions.
It is. Thankfully, in well, I guess in Mistborn, it's a little more. It's actually, I feel like, a little tougher because it seems like it's guaranteed. Like, it's not like you could
Yeah,
build up an immunity in this case. It's not like a
right.
virus, which is maybe even scarier. And it gives some weight to how all of our characters and the Ska that we've seen throughout the story are terrified of the mists. They don't want to be out in the mists. And it kind of gives some more weight to that when you think about it. Think about it that way.
Yeah. Vin has adopted a pet Kolos, or one of them specifically
A
has
human?
no a Kolos.
Oh, human?
Yes,
Okay.
human the Kolos the human. Um, what I don't even remember. How does this come about? Why does she pick this one? Does he just hang out next to her, and so she starts talking to him, or why is it this guy?
That's a good question.
I don't remember.
At some point in the early chapters, they like took over the whole army, and Vin just like needed somebody to carry some stuff, and so
Oh,
she just
okay.
grabbed the nearest Koloss, was like, "Hey, you carry this," and then he's kind of stuck around her ever since.
And he hates her and wants to kill her, but Vin won't let him.
Yeah,
What a great
and
relationship.
there's that.
Absolutely. So, and what he says his name is human. He says his name is human, and he says he is human. Is that right?
Correct. He claims to be a human, but Vin keeps correcting him. So when Vin then asks what your name is, he says, "Well, call me human." And as like a trump card of, okay, now you have to call me
Uh,
human because that's my name. Haha. So he's human.
okay. All right. Even says stuff like we should be in the houses or things like that. It seems really weird. Similar to how I asked, what do you think about the Kandra and all their generations? I'm curious to get Eliot's perspective on how do you feel about the Koas? The perspective we have that about Koas are they're brutish and strong. They use these huge swords and they can go into a frenzy and just destroy. Like they are the strongest, like probably the strongest like beast type thing on this planet that we can really see, but the lowest intelligence level. Like there's not any range of emotion except like I guess happy and angry. Like that's about it. I don't even know if there's happy, but there's angry and neutral at least. Um,
I would Venn
and here,
diagram it on indifferent and angry. They kind of just hang
yeah,
out and do nothing, or they're angry.
that's a good way of saying it. Yeah. So there's that, and then here we see reasoning. It's reasoning. Human the Koloss is reasoning some with Vin. Not like big reasoning skills, but like you said, he's like, call me human or whatever, and he has the thought in his head that I'm human, I should be in a house. That's what humans do. It's weird. It's weird and it's almost a little uncomfortable, but it's like a primal kind of nature. I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious to know what you think, Eliot, thus far. It's all a bit much, I guess.
There's definitely questions. I think in one of these chapters, Vin even tries to dig into how they reproduce.
Hmm.
Everybody knows, well, yeah, that there's occasionally more of them, but apparently no one's paid attention for long enough to notice where the new ones come from, because there doesn't seem to be baby Koloss rolling around. So how do more Koloss happen? Don't know. The the bigger questions are interesting because it starts to feel like it's been a long time since I've read Frankenstein, but like the whole it's something that's been created as an attempt to make a human, and it didn't quite succeed, but the thing you made knows what it was intended to be and therefore thinks it should be that, but to everyone else clearly isn't. It's a weird situation.
Yeah, that is an interesting point.
I think that's actually a really good comparison. It seems like it, at least.
We were told that the Lord Ruler created the Koloss, right?
Believe so.
I think so. Yeah.
That might have been a
or
while
or
ago,
at
but
least or at least that he has control of the Koloss or something
right,
like that. And that's why, like, what people were sad that the Lord Ruler was gone, because then it seems like the Koloss were just kind of set loose.
right.
Seems a bit
I
weird.
I have that in my head as Lord Ruler created Koloss, but maybe some conflicting information to that though is references that Kandra are stated as of preservation,
Right.
and humans and Koloss are stated as of ruin.
Right. So
Like
maybe
unravel that.
so with that information, maybe it's deliberately not said that the Lord Ruler created Koloss because it he did create Kandra, right? That's the whole.
Right.
So he
I
did
think
create
so.
Kandra
Yeah.
while holding preservation.
Right.
So he probably, with that logic, he probably didn't create Koloss. He just had control of them as Lord Rulerness. So I would actually,
Yeah.
Right.
I don't. Maybe our comment section can inform us one way or the
Yeah.
other.
I think it could be as simple as the Lord Ruler could control them because the Lord Ruler had such incredible powers and element, and we know that Koloss can be controlled by Allomancy.
Right.
He could have just had them all in a little, light control to keep them stagnant and keep them from destroying rampaging villages. Um, but it could be something deeper as well. So that's something interesting. Do you think anything is going to come of this whole like this felt like kind of an odd thing to drop now of this like Koloss thinks he's a human dilemma, you know? I thought we were worried about the mists and the deepness and ruin and stuff like that.
The world ending. Yes.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. Not the social identity of this Koloss.
Feels like we're setting up a complex villain in the Koloss.
Okay.
Like we talked about in book one, how the Inquisitors are just plain evil. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no are they going to get a redemption arc, or I guess there's maybe like the whole they're being mind controlled thing, but the the actions of an Inquisitor are just pure evil. They delight in torture. Koloss maybe we're setting up as a foil to that of yeah, they're the armies of the bad guys, but they wish they were human, and if given the chance, could they become so? They're just actually cranky toddlers in 11-foot tall bodies. Like it feels like maybe we're setting up a oh wait, they're actually misunderstood, perhaps.
Sure. Ellen asked the group in a little meeting that they have, tell me about Kelsier, because I didn't know him, but you all did. Tell me about Kelsier. And Sazid which we'll talk about him in a second, Sazed is the one who replies, and Sazed says, Kelsier would tell us to smile more. And Breeze and Ham kind of echo this and say, oh yeah, back in book 1 when we lost our entire army, Kelsier cracked a joke, like immediately. It's not that he was out of touch, it's that he was just determined to be happy, and that the Lord Ruler couldn't take that from him no matter how things went wrong or how hard they tried. So Sazed says we should all smile more. That's what Kelsier would say.
And they don't outright say it, but isn't it Kelsier's line, I am hope?
Yes. Kelsier's line is I am hope.
That's what they're talking around. They don't say it, but what they need is more hope. And not the, oh, I hope it's going to get better. No, the faith side of hope. The I have hope that it will get better
Yeah.
side of things. That's what they're talking about, even though they don't use that word.
I'm glad you brought that up. Is that Kelsier's last words?
I think so.
I think it is.
I think it is that I am hope.
Right before he gets stabbed through the
I
chest
am
with
that
the
which
spear.
you cannot kill.
Yeah.
I think I am hope. I think that is.
In the same meeting here, Set kind of just acknowledges to the reader that he's just kind of part of the group now. Like last book, we definitely didn't include him as part of like the crew, and they even ask him like, "What are you doing here?" Like,
Yeah, I chuckled a bit at one of the main villains of the previous book, just chilling over there in the corner, providing advice. Why is he here? Oh yeah, he's good at strategy, so yeah, he's on our team now. All right.
don't they say he's like the Dachshund substitute? Something like the aristocrat strategy dude.
I guess. He's still kind of a jerk.
Very much a jerk. What about Marsh before we end part 1?
Okay,
Last
So
catch
we
this.
just get a
We were talking about Kolos just now. There's a line in this chapter that says how many Kolos Marsh has at his command. You guys remember the number? 300,000. That is a freaking lot of Kolos.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Like,
considerably more than the 20,000 that Vin and Elend have.
yeah, right. Like, cover the land with bodies, Kolos.
I'll be honest, I didn't remember that. That's really scary.
Yeah.
300,000 Kolos. They talk about how 20,000 is like I mean, that's like you're gonna level cities. Like you can't, really hardly fight back against 20,000 Kolos.
And as far as we know, our heroes don't know about this. Apparently, there's this massive 300,000 Kolos army in the north in Terrace that they don't know about.
But Marsh does come up with a plan.
Which is?
Wait for Ruin to get complacent and then seize his moment and kill himself.
Yes, which we've seen him try to do, I think, twice already in this book.
Yeah.
And so at this point, he's resigned. Say, okay, so Ruin can stop me, so I'll stop and pretend to be Ruin's little helper. And then somehow when I get my moment, that's when I'll pull my spike out. Even though both times so far it hasn't worked.
I did get a feeling as I was reading this chapter. I couldn't help comparing in my mind Ruin's control of Marsh and Vin's control of Human the Colossus.
Oh.
They
Okay.
feel rather similar.
Because of Human's line of I hate you, I want to kill you.
That and just the whole I can let you do what you want to do, or with just a simple thought, I can take complete control of you and your every motion.
Okay.
It feels like the same thing. And that makes it feel kind of icky.
Uh-huh.
That is a really interesting parallel that I've never thought of.
Me neither.
So the difference, the difference I'm thinking of is, and this is why I think this is adding a lot of weight to why it's important that we're having this conversation with human, the Colossus, it gives him a personality. Until then, a personality, if you will. It shows he has desires, I guess, or thoughts, right? Before then, we just think of the Colossus as completely mindless and helpless, right? Whereas we know Marsh, if he were not being fully controlled by Ruin, maybe wouldn't be helpless. Like, we know Marsh, we know who he is, we know he himself's not, like, evil, right? He is an Inquisitor, done a lot of bad things. That's a different topic. But, we have a perspective of Marsh as a human, but we don't have perspective of the Colossus in that same way. And that's where it's different. But you're right. It is a very interesting parallel of complete control over someone. Complete control over someone is kind of a messy thing ethically, Um,
And I
goodness, yeah.
and I think it's absolutely okay to draw this conclusion that the way Vin thinks of human is probably the way Ruin thinks of Marsh, and that you can do whatever you want until you're going to go directly against me, and then I'm going to take complete control of you. So applying that to Marsh, we see the tragic end to that. So comparing that to human, yeah, like
One other thing that has me curious is, so we've seen Marsh. That's the only Inquisitor perspective we have, because he's the only Inquisitor that we would know. Like, we knew Marsh before he became an Inquisitor, so that makes sense why he's our reference point. But what's to say that the other Inquisitors aren't in a similar-ish boat? They may all just be bad. They may all be bad except Marsh, and that's okay. But obviously, they're all going to act bad because they are under Ruin's control. Who's to say there's not Eliot joked about there's no Inquisitor redemption arc, which I would agree, but there is the thought of, if they were somehow freed from Ruin's control, would they be, would it be different?
you have a theme for part 1, Eliot?
I do. Mind control. Now that we spent so much time talking about it, it easily could be.
Yeah.
Despair and depression.
That's the direction I more went with. Was I went with impending apocalypse, because it just feels like that's the start of this book. Is, oh yeah, and the world is falling apart. What are you going to do about it? And every chapter we go through, it's like, oh no, the world's really falling apart, and it's even falling apart more than you thought it was. It seems like we're picking up speed. The avalanche, the snowball is getting bigger and bigger. Of just this planet does not seem like a good planet to be on right now.
Yeah. Vacation destinations? Anyone?
Yeah.
Scadrial?
I'll take high storms any day at this point.
Spoilers.
It's just high storms. There's storms on Roshar.
All the time.
All right. Real quick into part 2. We went 3 chapters into part 2. Spook. Eliot, way back in the Final Empire, I think we were 6 episodes into the Final Empire, and Vin and Kelsier do a pewter drag all the way back to Luthadel. And you made an offhand comment of, that seems really dangerous. that seems scary, that your Mistborn powers let you push your body to those extremes. I believe you even dropped the phrase addict or the term addiction. Fast forward to this book, we open part 2 with Spook. What do you think of Spook in his current situation?
And this is getting a little freaky.
Yeah.
We pick it up with Spook, where in his perspective, he drops the fact that he's been flaring, not burning, like full on burn your tin as hard as you can for a year,
Mm-hmm.
more than
Yep.
a year straight.
Since clubs died.
And it seems like we're in full on substance addiction. with Spook.
Yep.
It does not seem like a nice way to live. And yet it becomes that thing where when you let it go, when you stop, you crave it so much. The world seems dull without it. So he has to have it, but it's clearly ruining him,
Interesting term.
which I didn't think about before I said it. But then as soon as I did, I was like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Ooh.
But yeah,
The chapter 16 epigraph, I won't read 14 and 15. I'll save those for another time. But chapter 16, I want to read because it directly addresses this. They are called allomantic savants, men and women who flare their metals so long and so hard that the constant influx of allomantic power transforms their very physiology. In most cases, with most metals, the effects of this are very slight. Bronze burners, for instance, often become bronze savants without knowing it. Their range is expanded from burning the metals so long. Becoming a pewter savant is dangerous, as it requires pushing the body so hard in a state where one cannot feel exhaustion or pain. Most accidentally kill themselves before this process is complete. And in my opinion, the benefit isn't worth the effort. Tin savants, however, now, they are something special. Endowed with senses beyond that of any normal allomancer would need or even want, they become slaves to what they touch, hear, see, smell, and taste. Yet the abnormal power of these senses gives them a distinct and interesting advantage. One could argue that, like an inquisitor who has been transformed by hemalurgic spikes, the allomantic savant is no longer even human.
No, I think that's a little extreme. Like, I understand it, but that's kind of, I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
definitely gives impressions of becoming part of the magic that you're using.
Yeah.
Using the magic so much that it becomes part of you, and you become as much it as it is, as you are a conduit of it,
Good word.
which I don't think I don't think that has a happy ending in many scenarios.
Yeah. The stuff going on around Spook is interesting. He's a spy in Orto for our heroes, and Orto is under the control of the citizen in capital letters, the citizen. And we find out by the end of chapter 16 that the citizen is a mystic. Tinai? Or is he a no? No. He was pushing steel pushing, which is a coin shot.
Right.
Coin shot. So the citizen is coin shot, and the guards he's fighting are pewter, or are thugs, are pewter arms or whatever they're called. So right before he blacks out, right before the end of 16, Spook thinks to himself, "Hold up, these are not ska. These are nobles in disguise of we need to rid the city of all nobles, but secretly they're mistings, which means they at least have a little noble blood in them."
They're at least descendants of nobles, right?
Sure. And Orto is going full Kelsier. If you have any noble blood in you, you do not deserve to live. That's how they interpret Kelsier's teachings back in the Final Empire. So yeah, they burn people alive in houses in chapter 16 that have noble descent or have noble ancestry.
By the point of chapter 16, by the end of 16, I was getting full on French Revolution vibes.
Yeah.
When they were going to the execution, I was like afraid that they're gonna walk into the square and there's a guillotine in the middle of the square. Like it just felt like that's what it was building to. We've had kind of this French flavor to all this on schedule, just a little bit, the names, right?
Kelsia,
And
Demu. Yeah.
yeah, and the architecture perhaps of some of our cities and stuff is almost like a Gothic French kind of influence. Not that I know anything about that, but this was like full on. Oh, okay, and we're also now in the middle of the French Revolution,
Right.
where the common folk have overthrown the nobles and are lining people up to execute them on the slightest pretense. This is full on like French Reign of Terror.
What would that foreshadow uh the fate of the citizen? What happens to him?
Headless,
Yep.
or I guess burnt alive in a house.
Equivalent. Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Anything else for episode 174 before we get well into part 2 next week?
You ready for a crazy theory?
Always.
Always, absolutely.
Buckle up for this one. So I'm not sure if this is just my brain grabbing random facts scattered throughout these chapters and forcing them together whether they fit or not. But prediction is Spook will become an Inquisitor.
Okay.
And I don't have any one thing to point to on why I think this is true, but just so much around these chapters seem to align. This thirst for experience, this thirst for the like purest form of senses and a delight in certain things to an excess seems very inquisitory to
Mm.
me from the experiences that we've got from like Marsh and the perspective we've got from him, where Marsh is looking on the land and delighting in its chaotic state. Spook's not there, but he's starting to say things and do things that feel like that kind of sentiment of I want to experience the world in extremes just because.
Mm.
So I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know when, but somewhere in here, Spook is either going to be like presented the opportunity and willingly choose to be, or is going to fall into a trap of hungering for more and Inquisitor full on hemalurgic spikes. Still don't quite know exactly what all of that means,
What?
but Inquisitor.
What? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Did Spook get spiked through the pewter guard?
Oh, wow. Yes, he sure did. End of this chapter.
Yeah.
The guard is in front of him, the pewter arm,
Uh-huh.
and a sword is stabbed through, oh my
Uh-huh.
goodness, through that guy into Spook.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Hits
I
his
didn't even think about that.
hits his heart too, doesn't it?
Or close to.
Yeah, I
Or
think it was through the other person's heart,
Through
wasn't
the
it?
other person's heart, it hits his chest.
Yeah.
That seems oddly specific.
No, it does. Yeah.
I didn't even put that together until you mentioned that.
I
But
hadn't
there's my
either.
one thing. There's my specific thing I'll point to for this prediction and theory that I had in mind all along.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, I was very much thinking like much later down the road,
Yeah.
but yikes, if that's an act of hemalurgy
Right.
right there, which again, we don't we have name. We have the name of it. We know it involves spikes. We know it involves metals. We know it's magic and it involves blood and killing. But like how exactly do you do it and what are you even doing? We don't have all those pieces yet. But gosh, yeah, that seems highly suspicious.
Seems lowly suspicious. All right.
Very
Give me a
funny.
second.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let's do a quick Stormlight refresher to end this episode. Paul,
Oh dear,
you're going to
I'm in
lead.
trouble.
We are 1-0 to Eliot. Paul, you're going to lead this, and Eliot will lead next week. Your first question is a chapter name. You need to tell me what happened in the chapter. Your chapter title is Monsters.
Monsters. I think this was a Shalon flashback chapter in Words of Radiance, not Rhythm of War, because those are still easy to mix up. I think it was a flashback chapter. And if I need to go into more specifics,
You don't, because you're incorrect. Eliot.
okay, good.
Ah, that
Oh dear.
was absolutely going to be my answer.
I was pretty confident in that one. I can't lie. I thought I knew
I
that
was
one.
going to say the same thing. Well, it's clearly a Shalon chapter that's not a flashback,
Okay.
but one in which she does monstrous things.
Incorrect. You both
Percenting?
are correct that it is in Words of Radiance. I'll give you that much. We actually mentioned this chapter title in the podcast because I remember Eliot thought this was funny because this is the chapter that Kaladin learns how to ride a horse. And Kaladin calls the horses monsters. And that is from the chapter title. I thought that was going to be
hilarious.
a easy ball for you guys, but apparently not. All right.
Nope.
No, I remember that we talked about that now barely, but I don't remember that at all.
You don't
That's
remember one of our
hilarious.
random conversations from 3 years ago, Paul?
3 years ago.
I know. How dare I?
All right. Well, I have an advantage because I listen back to this podcast every week to edit. But all right, Eliot, over to you for your quote ID for the week. You don't have to set me doing anything important. I came to you instead of one of the other battalions because most of your men spend time patrolling. If I'm patrolling, I won't be in much danger, and my fits won't hurt anyone. But at least I can feel what it's like to be a soldier.
Can I get another read of it? And can you also remind me? What's my goal of what I'm supposed to answer? Sorry to
all you have to tell me.
cut you short.
All you have to tell me is who is talking. You don't have to set me doing anything. Oh, go ahead, Eliot. If you get it right, then I don't.
Going first, or
Eliot is going first, and if you get it right, I don't have to reread it.
Okay.
That is Renarin.
Correct. Who's he talking to?
That I'm scratching my head slightly because I can't remember exactly the course of events. Renarin joins Bridge 4 eventually, but it doesn't feel like he's talking to. Maybe he is.
He's talking to Kaladin.
Kaladin?
Yep, you're right.
It is
Okay.
Kaladin? Okay.
All right, Eliot's
I
up.
thought it was
Learn
going to
to
be
Kaladin.
Sigzil. Yeah.
He's talking to Kaladin.
I thought he was going to be talking to Sigzil. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Back over to Paul. Here's your review. You need to tell me what book it's about and what they rated the book.
Okay, this is my favorite style of question that we have. These are fun.
These are very fun. These are even more fun looking for these. I laugh quite a bit looking for these.
Yeah, I'm sure.
This went from medieval political thriller to a nerd lore fever dream. I'll always long for the days when the story was about men wielding magical swords in shiny armor and not about depression, PTSD, and an incomprehensible babble of sci-fi fantasy jargon.
I think oh gosh. I think they rated it decent. I think they rated it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
It is out of 5, correct?
Yep, 5 stars.
Okay. I think they rated it a 4 out of 5, and I think this is about Rhythm of War.
Okay. Eliot?
This is one of those like tantrum ratings where they floored it 1 out of 5. And can you do 0 out of 5? Is that it?
You cannot. You have to give it at least 1, which I don't know why.
Okay.
Why would you not be able to do 0? Anyway.
Yeah, it's
big question.
This is the 1 out of 5. They rock bottomed it because they finished a book, or maybe they didn't even finish, and they got angry about it, and so they hopped on Goodreads to just slam it. 1 out of 5. I want to go Rhythm of War. That the plot of that book fits the description of what was read. I'd be surprised if this person made it to Rhythm of War.
No, that's a good point.
I don't see them reading that far. So I'm gonna actually go with Words of Radiance.
All right. This is a 1 out of 5 star rating for Rhythm of War.
Ah,
So we split it
You
again.
shared points on that one again.
Wow. Okay. I'm surprised a 1 out of 5. If you've made it that far and you're still rating it a 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
yeah.
The description seemed very Rhythm of War to me because very like, it was even a
Yep.
bit much for me of the amount of fabrials and stuff.
True.
But man, a 1 out of 5, that's tough. That's tough.
All right. We are 2-1 to Eliot, and this goes to Eliot first. This is just a standard trivia question for your 5th and final question. Who does Venli's spren, Timber, constantly tell Venli to reveal herself as a Knight Radiant to?
Yeesh. Bentley. Feel yourself. I remember these promptings. I remember these. Oh, but who is it to? It's not Leshwi. Is it Leshwi? It might be. It's not, though. Ugh. It's Leshwi. That's my answer.
Paul, would you like to answer this?
No, I'm kidding. So my initial thought was Leshwi as well, but I have there's this like thought stuck in my head that there's like the thing is I would never come to a name, but I think there's like some random Parshendi soldier that she was not surrounded. She was like in their crew. Like there's like a battle going on or whatever, and she's like in their ranks. It's not like in the battle. I'm not doing a good job of describing this, but there's like she's with soldiers, and it would not be good for them to know that she's a Knight Radiant. But I feel like Timber keeps saying, "You should tell them," but I'm not sold that that's right enough. I would also say Leshwi. That's who I was thinking, and I was even more embarrassed because I spent half the time Eliot was talking about it, trying to remember the name Leshwi. It was right on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of anyone other than that because we know it is someone in the Parshendi realm. It's not a human. It's not an Alethi.
Sure. Final answer?
Yeah, I have to stick with Leshwi.
Both of you are correct. It is Leshwi. She does reveal herself at the end of Rhythm of War, like 3 chapters from the end. And Leshwi freaks out in a positive way because she gives the reveal that the Spren have come back to us. We were the original Knights Radiant, and the Spren have come back to us. You bonding Timber has huge implications for the singers moving forwards. So Leshwi is very happy about it. And then she drops the name Raya as a... Did you know an honor Spren named Raya? I used to know her, which would imply that Leshwi used to be a Windrunner. All right.
Absolutely. I remembered that conversation when she was told that.
That goes again to Eliot. So he is leading 2-0 going into next week. Any closing thoughts, Paul or Eliot?
I'm excited for the next review prediction. That's my favorite question as of now. Those are very funny.
Yes. See you gentlemen next week. Thanks for joining me.
See ya.
Peace out.